first, this story, the United States delegation to President-elect Marcos's inauguration will be led by the Vice President's husband. U.S. Second Gentleman Douglas M. Hoff, husband of Vice President Kamala Harris, will attend the event in U.S. President Joe Biden's stead. Marcos earlier invited Mr. Biden during the recent phone call when the U.S. President congratulated Marcos on his electoral win. Other members of Biden's delegation include Chargé d'Affaires Heather Variava of the U.S. Embassy here in Manila, as well as 4 other U.S. officials and the U.S. Director of the Asian Development Bank. Pack your raincoats and umbrellas if you're planning to attend the presidential inauguration on June 30th. Pag-asa forecasts gloomy weather on the day of the ceremony. The city of Manila, where the inauguration will take place, and the rest of the greater Metro Manila area will have scattered rain showers and thunderstorms on Thursday. These will be caused by the southwest monsoon or habagat. But Pag-asa says no tropical cyclone is seen to affect the country. CNN Philippines is your most trusted destination for the live coverage of the inauguration of the country's 17th president. We will bring that to you live as it happens this Thursday, June 30th, from the National Museum in Manila. Catch our special coverage beginning at 9 a.m. with senior anchor Pinky Webb and myself. Organizers are completing, like we said, the final touches on the National Museum. For a historian, the building symbolizes what he calls the country's complicated journey to independence and democracy. Rex Remigio tells us more.
President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr.
Preparations are in full swing for the inauguration of incoming President Bongbong Marcos at the National Museum in Manila. Military bands are holding marching practices. Workers are painting metal grills and seats, welding metal parts of tents for VIP guests, and cleaning the surroundings from time to time. Aside from its beautiful architecture, the National Museum of Fine Arts has been a witness to some of the country's historical events. This is where Manuel L. Quezon held his inauguration as the first Commonwealth President under the United States. Historian Xiao Chua says the museum's neoclassical architectural style looks the same as the U.S. Capitol, while its Greco-Roman columns symbolize power rooted on Western democracy.
Parang paalala siya na pinattern sa Amerika ang inyong demokrasya at ang nagbigay sa inyo ng demokrasya ay ang mga Amerikano. Para siyang reminder of our colonial past.
The National Museum is also where Jose P. Laurel was sworn in as president of the Japanese-sponsored Philippine Republic in 1943. Chua also notes that the Marcoses have personal memories at the National Museum. He says this is where Bongbong's parents, the late Ferdinand Marcos and former First Lady Imelda, met for the first time.
Doon nagkita si Imelda Romualdez na kumakain doon. Siya ay pamangkin ni Speaker Daniel Romualdez, bumisita lang doon at nakita siya nung congressman ng Ilocos Norte na si Ferdinand Marcos.
The historian also says students held huge protests outside the venue during the first quarter storm in 1970, when the elder Marcos delivered his 5th State of the Nation address. The National Museum housed the Senate and House of Representatives at that time.
Yung mga alaala ng mga protesta, ng mga paggigiit natin ng kasarilan, yun ang sisidlan, yung gusaling yun. Kaya napakahalagang gusali. So sana hindi sayangin ng mga manunumpa.
Most importantly, Chua is hoping the structure would serve as a reminder for those who will take their oaths of office to not repeat the mistakes of the past. Rex Remitio, CNN Philippines.
No reprieve in sight for motorists with another fuel price hike taking effect tomorrow. Diesel prices will go up by 1 peso and 65 centavos per liter and gasoline by nearly 1 peso per liter. As for kerosene, motorists can expect a 10 centavo increase. Now, this marks the 5th straight hike of diesel and kerosene prices and the 4th for gasoline. Energy officials say a weak peso against the US dollar is keeping the local fuel costs high. Motorists in Metro Manila should brace for heavy traffic in Quezon City as authorities conduct repairs southbound of the EDSA commuting flyover. George Quiles walks us through the measures in place to ease traffic.
Motorists should allot longer travel time if they are passing through the southbound of EDSA Kamuning in Quezon City. With the closure of the flyover since Saturday, the traffic became much slower, with only 2 lanes of the service road passable. Add this problem to the soaring fuel prices.
Saan pa kayo usad pa doon, sir? Simula saan?
Simula Mesentris.
Okay. Sir, alam mo ba na ganito ang sitwasyon dito ngayon, nasarado tong flyover?
Hindi po.
Grabe ang traffic boss, hanggang doon, lulo.
Alam niyo mo bang sarado tong ano?
Hindi po ngayon pa nakadaan dito eh.
Ay, sobra. Lalo na galing ng Commonwealth. Halos wala na natitira sa...
Gaano kahaba? Alam niyo ba sir na sarado tong...
alam ko, kaya lang andito yung pasahero ko eh. No choice ako para siyempre hatid ko siya eh.
The Metro Manila Development Authority has deployed around 100 personnel to the area to manage the traffic and direct motorists towards alternate routes. Currently, vehicles coming from EDSA Quezon Avenue may turn right at Mother Ignacia Avenue, Panay Avenue, Scout Albano or Scout Borromeo streets to avoid a traffic jam. The MMDA has also posted alternate routes on their social media accounts.
Kung hindi po nila kaagad nakita itong ating abiso, pagpaumanhin nyo po, konting pangunawa, wag po tayo magsiksikan, magbigayan kung maaari dahil yan po yung mas mapapabilis yung takbo ng mga sasakyan.
Authorities say it may take them a month to finish the repairs, but they promise to try their best to finish earlier. That's if they will not find further damages on the flyover and if weather permits. George Quiles, CNN Philippines.
Coming up on Newsnight, outgoing Vice President Leni Robredo introduces the new face of the opposition to the incoming Marcos administration. And crash landing on new stars Sonia Jin and Hyun Bin are expecting a baby. You're watching CNN Philippines.
RPN DXKP Pagadian.
Ang inyong Radyo Ronda RPN Radio Philippines Network live to the world pinaagi sa FB page karon mag-download na pinaagi sa Google Play ug Apple Store, YouTube ug Twitter alang sa mas kipakuskan nga mga balita, komentaryo, kasayuran ug kalingawan. Ang mas kipakuskan nga inyong Radyo Ronda.
Member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Welcome back to CNN Philippines. Again, our top story, the country will see another change in leadership on Thursday, June 30th. Preparations in full swing at the National Museum in Manila, where President-elect Bongbong Marcos will take his oath of office at noon of June 30. While the threat level remains low, security officials taking no chances. Senior correspondent David Santos reports.
Heavily armed police units carrying out a simulation of a violent attack at the Rizal Park on Monday as part of the final rehearsals for the June 30 inauguration. Several blocks along the streets leading to the National Museum have been barricaded since Sunday. These include parts of P. Burgos and Taft Avenues, Finance Road, and General Luna Street. Several civilian and military trucks have also been stationed just outside the museum. Also on standby, special teams like the SWAT and counter-terrorism units that specialize on chemical or nuclear attacks. The gun ban now in effect all over Metro Manila until July 2nd. In a radio interview on Monday, the police say they are deploying more than 9,000 personnel, while the Coast Guard have started patrolling the water, including Manila Bay, to ensure the security and safety of those involved in the inauguration as well as the general public.
Ang instruction ni Admiral Abu ay maging vigilance sa lahat ng aspeto nitong kadabigan para hindi tayo malusutan kung sakaling may magtatangka talagang manggulo at gumamit ng karagatan at ng Pasig River.
Protest actions will only be allowed at the Liwasang Bonifacio in front of the National Post Office. Demonstrations outside this area will require permits. Violators could be arrested despite police assuring maximum tolerance.
Sabi ko nga marami pang pagkakataon para ihayag nyo yung inyong kalugin. Pero nakikiusap kami na napakahalaga ditong activist na to, napakahalaga nitong gagawin ito, magpaparga ito sa history ng ating bansa. Huwag nyo naman sanang sirain at ipakita at ipahiya ang ating bansa.
So far, there are no plans to close down public spaces like Rizal Park, but public movement could be restricted, especially in areas near the National Museum. Like Manila, the PNP is hoping adjacent cities will also declare a non-working holiday on Inauguration Day to allow people to stay home and avoid being inconvenienced by the massive traffic rerouting arrangements. David Santos, CNN Philippines.
3 days before he steps down from office, President Rodrigo Duterte attends the oath-taking ceremony of his son and other newly elected government officials in Davao City. Sebastian Baste Duterte took his oath of office as the next city mayor. His mother, Elizabeth Zimmerman, and sister, outgoing city mayor and Vice President-elect Sara Duterte, were also in attendance along with other family members. Just yesterday, President Duterte delivered what could be his shortest speech yet before thousands of supporters who gathered at the Quirino Grandstand in Manila to mark the end of his term.
Sambayang Pilipino, maraming salamat sa inyo.
Over a dozen performers sang the president's most loved songs at the event, which was entitled Salamat PRRD. The concert also featured a drone show and a fireworks display. Now, as Vice President Leni Robredo also prepares to step down from office on June 30th, the opposition leader passes on the torch to the next woman who will rise to become the highest elected official from their ranks. Anjo Alimario reports.
You are now the highest elected official sa opposition. And lahat kami masaya na ikaw yung natitirang humahawak ng ating bandila.
After her loss in the presidential race, outgoing Vice President Leni Robredo relinquishes her role as the leader of the opposition. Another woman will take on her role, Senator Risa Ontiveros. She was the lone opposition bet who made it to the Senate Magic 12. Robredo praises Ontiveros for using her position to give voice to the powerless and for pushing for good governance. She's confident Ontiveros will continue the opposition's cause.
Andito lang kami lagi magsusuporta sa iyo. Kami yung mga sundalo mo na ngayon, Sen Risa. Kaya asahan mo yung aming kung paano mo sinuportahan yung buong sambayanan na Pilipino. Ganon din yung suportang aasahan mo lahat sa amin.
Ontiveros says she'll still work with Robredo, other opposition leaders, parties and movements to redress the inequality on the ground.
Pararamihin natin ang mga Pilipinong nakikibahagi sa proseso ng demokrasya upang maramdaman ng mas marami pa ang mga resulta nito.
Like Robredo, Ontiveros will fight back harder against disinformation. She even issued a warning.
To all the dubious characters in the fake news universe, this time, we will not let your reckless disregard for truth slander our democracy, our country, ever again.
With just 3 days before Robredo steps down, her staff are busy emptying her office. Artworks donated during the campaign have been packed and segregated. Some will find a new home in her museum. Others will go to a fundraising event during the launch of her Angat Buhay NGO. Anjo Alimario, CNN Philippines.
A first-time senator is taking on the chairmanship of the Energy Committee amid soaring fuel prices. Senator-elect Raffy Tulfo says he also wants to be part of the Blue Ribbon panel. But for the outgoing Senate President, neophyte lawmakers like Tulfo should take it slow. More from Amor Santos.
Ganda. Tamang-tama yung height. Okay.
Incoming Senator Raffy Tulfo gets a feel of the session hall where lawmakers deliberate. It was his first time to visit the Senate on Monday, 3 days before assuming office. He was briefed by the Legislative Department and toured the Senate building. He's also taking a 2-week crash course at the UP National College of Public Administration and Governance. Tulfo is poised to be chairman of the Senate Committee on Energy, a pivotal role amid rising fuel prices.
Nag-gather ako ng team of experts sa energy, ay yung tinatawag na systems loss, yung pagtaas ng kuryente, yung palaging brownout.
Tulfo says the panel will tackle the suspension of fuel excise tax, and incumbent committee head Sen Win Gachalyan will be his vice chairman. On the requested ayuda for the middle class,
I don't think so. There are data na nakita ko na 8 million Filipinos are still receiving below minimum wage. Yun dapat ang targetin ng ating pamahalaan na mabigyan ng ayuda. Yung mga nasa poverty line, wag yung middle class. Middle class can take care of themselves, I'm sure.
Tulfo is also set to chair the Committee on OFWs. He also wants to be part of the Blue Ribbon Committee, saying he has investigated erring government workers through his radio program for the past 2 decades. But as a broadcaster, he's not keen on raising the issue of press freedom with President-elect Bongbong Marcos.
Napakababaw naman niya. Bilang senator, I'm representing the whole nation, no longer the press, members of the press.
Other incoming senators will have an orientation here at the Senate on Tuesday. Outgoing Senate President Tito Soto has this advice for neophyte lawmakers.
Know your place. Pakiramdaman mo mabuti ang ikangay sitwasyon doon sa Senado. At wag mo nang sugod na sugod. Mas magandang makinig ka muna. Pag-aral ka. And then practice due diligence.
Amor Santos, CNN Philippines.
It's not yet the end of the road for the joint oil and gas exploration deal between Manila and Beijing in the West Philippine Sea. Chinese officials say they're ready to work with the new Philippine government for negotiations. But as Tristan Odal reports, experts have different views on whether the Marcos leadership should revive the joint exploration talks.
The termination of the joint oil and gas exploration talks with China under President Rodrigo Duterte could give President-elect Bongbong Marcos a clean slate in terms of exploring the resources in the West Philippine Sea with other countries. Experts and diplomats say the challenge now is whether the next administration will continue to engage Beijing and find a common ground without compromising the Philippines' sovereignty. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says it is looking forward and ready to work with the new administration to advance the negotiations. China maintains that the joint oil and gas deal with the Philippines is, quote, the right way to manage maritime differences. In a virtual forum, the Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Institute denounces the termination of the deal.
Giving it no say in the consequences thereafter. The incoming president must, and we expect, will stand up to this travesty.
In a tweet, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teddy Boy Locsin Jr. says the government must look back at what happened in the 3-year negotiation before giving the talks another shot. He adds details are important so that the deal will not be unconstitutional. Former DFA Chief Albert Del Rosario says Marcos should appoint foreign affairs and energy officials that are upright and patriotic. Del Rosario also cites the need for the Philippines to find energy sources. Fishers Group Pamalakaya wants the Marcos administration to shelve the talks on joint gas exploration with China. But for maritime expert J. Batong Bakal, the Marcos administration can always make a fresh start.
As long as the Duterte administration did not make any kind of apparently clear, binding, or legal commitments, then they can start fresh. Okay, so they can deal with the question of joint development from the very beginning, from the very basics.
Experts say it is important for the incoming Marcos administration to learn from the negotiations conducted by the Duterte administration to determine the parameters set by China. It is also important for Marcos to set some conditions and maintain status quo should negotiations resume under his watch. Tristan Odalo, CNN Philippines.
Officials are still waiting to find out if the Health Technology Assessment Council will approve a third dose for healthy 12 to 70 years old. That's amid lower booster vaccination among the elderly. Doctors already warn of waning immunity from primary vaccines, and early scientific findings say getting COVID again could increase health risks. Caroline Bonkin has more.
Alfie Ignacio had COVID infection in October, yet months after recovering, his body seems weaker. He gets more easily tired than usual, affecting his work as a delivery rider.
Hindi ko natatapos yung buong araw na biyahe. Sa ngayon, konti nakaka-recover naman na.
He's extra careful now not to get COVID again. A preprint study in the U.S. shows reinfection increases risk of death, hospitalization, and having at least one lingering effect of COVID infection. Authors said preventing reinfection is crucial. Other experts have yet to evaluate this study. While its points are valid, vaccine expert Dr. Nina Gloriani notes this study has not accounted factors like patients' medical condition. Infectious disease expert Dr. Jean Solantes says chances of reinfection and long COVID complications are higher among unvaccinated and unboosted. Solantes sees long COVID more in his elderly patients. Most common symptoms are fatigue and forgetfulness. Some get depressed or have difficulty sleeping.
This long COVID can also be dangerous and can complicate into other possible complications like heart attack, like stroke.
He says a second booster will prevent risk of reinfection and eventually complications in the heart and respiratory system among high-risk individuals. And for general population, a second booster. Solantes stresses the need for second-generation vaccines with improved effectiveness against new and emerging variants. Current vaccines are only based on the original SARS-CoV-2. So even those who had COVID before or are fully vaccinated can get infected with Omicron and its subvariants.
As long as these vaccines, we're using first-generation vaccines, there will always be breakthrough infection.
A WHO interim statement on June 17th points out the importance of using vaccines designed against Omicron as booster shot as it offers more protection. Omicron, with its subvariants, is the currently circulating variant of concern worldwide.
Nag-evolve si virus. So we are not just looking at Omicron. Ultimate goal, now what we produce next should capture all, even yung future variants.
Vaccine makers are tweaking their formula to have Omicron-specific vaccines. Moderna recently announced its Omicron-containing booster shot showed superior antibody response against Omicron and fast-spreading subvariants BA4 and 5. Caroline Bonkin, CNN Philippines.
Entertainment news coming up. More BTS members embark on solo ventures, with one getting ready to release an album and another visiting Paris Fashion Week. More after the break.
RPN DXKP Pagadian.
Ang inyong Radyo Ronda RPN. RPN. Radio Philippines Network. Radio Philippines Network. Live to the world, pinaagi sa FB page, karon mag-download na. Pinaagi sa Google Play o Apple Store, YouTube o Twitter. Alang sa mas kipakuskan ng mga balita, komentaryo, kasayuran o kalingawan. Ang mas kipakuskan ng inyong Radyo Ronda
Network, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
You're watching Newsnight. In Kpop, J-Hope of BTS unveils images for his first solo album, Jack in the Box. Pre-orders open today. The first single for the album comes out July 1st. Hobi will be the first in the group to release his own record since BTS announced a break earlier this month. K-pop fans also abuzz about these three Korean stars who graced Celine's menswear show for Paris Fashion Week. Lisa of Blackpink, V of BTS, and actor Park Bo-gum went to the event together. Lisa is a global ambassador for Celine. And on-screen to off-screen couples, Sonia Jin and Hyun Bin, are expecting their first child together. Yejin shared the good news online, saying they will take care of the precious life that came to them. The crash landing on new stars got married in March this year. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pio Ontiveros. Before we go, take a look at how a major automotive company hopes to achieve carbon neutrality for one of its plants by 2035.
In 2015, the Toyota Motor Corporation, based in Japan, launched the Toyota Environmental Challenge 2050. As part of this challenge, Toyota Motor Philippines embarked in a renewable energy initiative for its manufacturing plant in Santa Rosa, Laguna. Now, Toyota Motor Philippines has announced that their manufacturing
He currently chairs the Senate Committee on Energy and Basic Education. He wants to serve in the upper chamber for another 6 years. Senator Sen Win Gachalyan is seeking re-election. We now get up close with the senator about his platforms and plans. Senator Win, thank you so much for joining us on this program. Pass or fail the first few days of the pilot phase of face-to-face classes in 100 public schools?
My grade will be pass. I went to two provinces to look at the setup. I went to Zambales and also to Quezon. And I have to give credit where credit is due. The teachers, principals, the superintendents, they all did a good job in preparing. In fact, they have much stricter health protocols in our schools compared to some hospitals. And they made do with whatever they had to make sure that our children are safe going back to school. And this is a learning process for us. And I'm pushing to increase the number of private schools, hopefully more than 1,000 across the different parts of our country.
If you are re-elected, how do you plan to improve the educational system?
Rico, first on the agenda is to invest in our teachers. Our teachers is the most important educational input that we can invest on. And we have very good teachers, we have dedicated teachers. In fact, during the pandemic, Rico, I've seen firsthand their sacrifices in order to bring education to the homes of our learners. But we need to support them. Number one, we need to make sure that they get also the best education possible during their college days. And then we support them with competitive benefits and salaries, because we're still very far off compared to Singapore, compared to Malaysia, even Thailand. We're very far off in terms of salaries and benefits. And make sure that they get the necessary training while they are teaching, because we need to improve their competencies and upgrade their skills during their service in government.
Senator Win, you chair the Senate Energy Committee, and currently what is being discussed is the sale of the Malampaya Deal to Odena of Dennis Uy. Should this deal be undone?
Well, Rico, I'll put my other hat, from basic education to the Energy Committee. In my analysis and my review of all the documents, I call this deal Lutong Macau, because the evaluation that is supposed to be conducted in order to assure all of us that the new operators qualified was tweaked in order for Udena to get this transaction. And I showed in many instances that in terms of the legal, in terms of the technical, and in terms of the financial, they evaluated two separate companies. So how can you approve a transaction wherein you evaluated two separate companies? And that's not what is prescribed under the law and what is prescribed under the Department Circular of DOE. So in my opinion, this evaluation is defective. Therefore, the approval is invalid. And we're now studying, Rico, on how to move forward with this invalid approval.
So if it's an invalid approval and it is undone, what happens next?
This is where the complexity comes in. Malampaya is an ongoing concern. Malampaya is an operating concern. It supplies 4 million homes, about 1/5 of our energy needs here in Luzon. So we need to study carefully that operations will not be hampered. What's important right now is electricity, the continuous flow of electricity to our homes. And we need to isolate this whole doubtful process from the operations of Malampaya, because we need to keep Malampaya running.
The development of the energy sector, Senator Win, was not a priority of the Duterte administration over the past 5 years. And the looming energy crisis is giving a lot of goosebumps to Filipino consumers, businesses, and the industry itself. What needs to be done to ensure power supply security for our kababayans?
Well, Rico, you hit the nail on its head. I've seen what we call the energy sufficiency of our country. Before, we're at a high of about 55% self-sufficient. We're now at around 50%, and it will go below 50%, because with the impending depletion of Malampaya, we have no choice but to import natural gas. So it will go below 50%, meaning we'll be importing more than 50% of our energy needs. So to increase our self-sufficiency, we have to use what we have. Number one is renewable energy. We have about 30,000 megawatts of potential renewable energy that we can explore in the country, or we can maximize. And then we should continue to explore oil and gas. The West Philippine Sea is a vast area of potential, of oil and gas potential. And we only have one, Malampaya operating. We can have more of that in the West Philippine Sea.
From education to energy, Senator Win, I want us to take a look at the political drama that took place over the weekend at the Commission on Elections and all the substitutions. You aspired to be the Vice President of Sara Duterte if she ran for President. Are you disappointed that she did not run for the presidency?
Well, I respect her decision, Rico. And for me, what's important is she ran for a national post. When I was vying for her vice presidency, I vied for her vice president because I believe in her track record, her experience, and also her character. I've worked with her when we were mayors before. We were both mayors at one point, and I've worked with her closely, especially in the League of Cities, and I've seen her diligence and her firmness when it comes to governance. So I believe in her capability. And what's important is now she's vying for a top post, and I think she'll be good for the country.
And who will you support for president, Senator Win?
We're still talking about that in our party, Rico. We're still waiting. November 15 just passed, and we need to evaluate very closely our decisions within the party. So we're still discussing that.
All right. The substitution provision and the omnibus election code was used and abused over the weekend. Should there be changes after next year's elections?
Well, Rico, me along with 4 other senators filed the bill to remove, as one of the grounds for substitution, voluntary withdrawal. Meaning substitution can happen only when somebody dies or somebody becomes incapacitated or disqualified, 3 grounds. But voluntary withdrawal should be removed as one of the grounds because clearly, Rico, it's being used as a parking space, for candidates. And my fear is in the future, this will be abused and even made money off. We will probably see candidates will file ahead of time and then sell their position. And we don't want this to be a bad precedent for the country.
Let's now take a look at the economy. Millions of Filipinos are still out of jobs, Senator Win. The economy remains weak and faces a long road towards recovery. If you are re-elected, Senator, how will you try to jumpstart the economy and create jobs through legislation?
True, Rico. Unemployment remains to be elevated at 8%. That's approximately about 4 million unemployed individuals. My take on a fast recovery should be working capital should be ready for businesses, especially in tourism and small and micro businesses. Our economy will eventually swing back. But the problem is because of the last 1 year, a lot of the working capitals of this company, especially in tourism, especially small and medium enterprises, have been depleted. Some of them operated and some of them even did not shut down for the sake of their employees. But when the economy returns back to normal, they will not have enough capital to take advantage of that. So government should provide easy loans, should provide working capital that they can tap into and swing with the economy upwards.
Let's focus now on this issue of corruption. A lot of allegations are taking place over the last few months and a couple of years. It is systemic in our bureaucracy. How should we fight it, Senator?
No, that's a very tough question, Rico. In fact, this morning I was in a forum. I said 3 things that will remain in our country for the next generations: corruption, drugs, and poverty. We need to put the system and strengthen the institutions because this will be a long haul in terms of fighting poverty, fighting drugs, and even poverty. We need to make sure that institutions are strong and efficient. For example, I'll give you a very clear example. In terms of prosecuting and convicting corrupt officials, it should not take years. If you will convict officials and it will take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, nobody will believe in the system. Nobody will respect the system. We need to make sure that the turnaround is faster so we can penalize and we can punish corrupt officials, and that will send a strong signal to those who are intending to steal and to corrupt the system.
And we will continue our up-close conversation with Senator Win Gachalyan after a quick break. And This is the final word on CNN Philippines. I'm Rico Hizon, and still with us for tonight's Up Close before the Filipino votes is re-electionist Senator Sherwin Gachalyan. Senator, you mentioned that three issues that will stay with us for many years to come. One is corruption, the other one is poverty, and drugs. How should the new government fight this war on drugs? Should it continue to adopt an ironclad, no-nonsense anti-drug policy?
You have to approach it in two ways, no? And I think the most simple equation there will be the demand and the supply side. I really believe that we should also put a lot of effort in the demand side. Go to our high schools, go to our schools and teach our students not to go into this very unproductive activities. And in Valenzuela, that's what we did. On the supply side, we need to deal it with an iron hand. I don't believe in dealing with drugs with the very soft approach. We need to make sure that we apprehend the bigger fish rather than the smaller fish on the streets. And we have to make sure that intelligence is also funded. This can only be arrested with A1 intelligence tracking down the bigger fish in the trade.
Senator, I have 6 questions for you, and you can only answer them with a yes or a no, and no explanation. My first question to you is...
That's a bit difficult task, Rico.
Yes or no? Do you favor easier public access to the statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth of the President, Vice President, and the members of Congress?
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Do you support lifting foreign ownership limits in the Constitution?
Yes, but I have a qualification to that, but yes.
Do you favor the reimposition of the death penalty for drug-related crimes?
Yes, I agree with that.
Should a sitting president be allowed to run for senator in the next election?
Yes.
Do you favor resuming peace talks with communist rebels?
Yes.
And should the country be more aggressive in protecting its maritime interests in the West Philippine Sea?
Definitely.
Senator, your final word now on why our kababayan should re-elect you to the Senate for another 6 years.
Well, first of all, Rico, thank you for this opportunity. And I commit to our constituents that no single penny will be wasted in investing in this representation. I've enacted 15 bills, both in the energy sector and in the education sector, and I'll continue to work hard for the betterment of our country.
Thank you so much for joining us in our up-close conversation, Senator Sherwin Gachalyan.